Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Do Americans have a constitutional right to keep their passwords and passcodes a secret? You may remember this all started about 5 years ago when the Justice Department tried to compel Apple to develop a way for law enforcement to access locked iPhones, but it later abandoned the request. All of that according to a Wall Street Journal article, which is, of course, our basis for today's episode. And it raises a thorny legal question. And the reason for that is because of the Fifth Amendment, which is often used as the defense for this, which basically is a little bit of a conundrum in that you cannot be compelled to testify against yourself in a criminal case. But at the same time, you can also have your person and possessions searched in the event of due process. So it's a conundrum here. And that's part of what we want to look at today, because the reason this is all back in the spotlight is the Supreme Court is considering whether or not to rule on this. And obviously, if they rule, it will provide us the definitive answer that we've been seeking. But of course, a conversation on privacy and the rights of Americans would not be complete without.
True Chat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
I really like that opening there. You are trying to get a head start in the winning the how many times we can use the word of the day there. But this is a thorny legal issue that I think is going to be kind of interesting, and hopefully will bring about some of our listeners wanting to comment and hearing your ideas, because we're kind of in uncharted waters. As the article points out, different states have different rulings, and many of them don't have any rulings at all. So, as you're listening, if you get fired up or you get some ideas that you can help us make this come to some kind of conclusion, make sure you let us know at podcast@thestateofus.org. That's podcast@thestateofus.org. But the word of the day, and Justin's already ahead 2-0, is conundrum. CONUNDRUM. It is a noun, and we will use the first definition. And I kind of like the definition: a riddle whose answer contains a pun. And the example is fascinating. What's the difference between a jeweler and a jailer? One sells watches and the other watches sells.
Okay.
That doesn't really fit. So we have to use the second definition, which is any puzzling question or problem. I like the first definition, but definition number 2 works for us today.
I was going to say, is there going to be a pun at the end of our conversation today?
I was trying to get into my phone and I forgot my password, but I was going to get into my vault of dad jokes and pull out some puns for you. But
yes,
no, we'll stick with the topic at hand and talk about what is the state's right. By the state, I mean the government. What is its right to accessing information on your phone? I have some very strong, not strong in that I don't think there's any other answer, but I pretty much have decided on this one. So, but I haven't let you know what it is. So let's go ahead and get into it and talk about some of the things in the article, and then let's get into what we think should be done and what's the fairest way to proceed.
As folks are listening today, Lance, if they want to share with us their thoughts and opinions, they can do that by sending us an email, right? And they just send it to podcast.
Yeah, you know what I said?
But you didn't share with them the address.
Yeah, I did. Twice. Were you zoning out and not listening to me?
I was pulling a Lance.
I said,
when I'm talking and you're not listening.
You can get a hold of us at podcast@thestateofus.org. I said it twice.
Okay.
Now 3 times. See, people, this is what happens. I talk and Justin doesn't listen. And then that's why sometimes his comments don't make sense to you guys, is because he's not following what I'm saying. He tries to blame that on me, but I listen to him. I just don't care to comment. So But he doesn't listen to me.
So what's worse? I heard what you said, and I don't care to respond.
Right? Move on to what I think is important. I mean, that's, but that's what happens in my life. I mean, I've got the three most important people in my life are females, my wife and two daughters. So I don't get listened to a lot. So I'm pretty much used to it. So it's okay. It's okay. It's okay, Justin, that I already took care of that. But you make sure now that everybody knows because you said it. So,
well, if you want to read today's article, then you can go to thestateofus.org, which is our website. That is linked there if you'd like to read it for yourself. But basically what this comes down to is part of the reason it's thorny or is a conundrum is because of the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution. Specifically, this sentence right here that says, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And what the defense is contending here is that a phone containing your personal information is essentially serving as being a witness against yourself.
I think you just took it out of context, as do the lawyers, because what is the participial phrase after that statement as you read it? Without due process of law. The way you read that, that's a comma. That's not a period. So we have to look at it in total. That's the way I am going to interpret this. I don't have much of a legal background, but the way I look at that is, okay, we can't do this unless there's due process of law, which means if we get a search warrant, if we go to court and say there's information here that we think we might find that proves that this person has been participating in illegal activities. And that's the same way when they tap your phone, they go to the bank and get your bank records. For you millennials and younger, we used to have a thing that we called a phone, which you all now refer to as a landline, or you don't even recognize it now in pictures. But they could, if you watch the old police shows, the authorities could subpoena your phone record and see who you had called. So that's the way I look at this, is that you have to go past that phrase. Well, you can't do this. You can't testify against yourself without the due process of law. So if they go through and they prove to a judge that there could be information there that would help prove that you've committed some kind of criminal act, then I think they're well within their rights to do this.
Part of the ongoing issue when we interpret the Constitution or when we debate it is the nature of punctuation that is used, right? And whether or not things were decidedly intended to stand on their own, or whether they were indeed reliant on other clauses in the same section. And to Lance's point, what he's referring to, and this again may seem trivial, but is very relevant. For example, it's one of the debates that we've had on the Second Amendment, right? A well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. Now, there's different ways to interpret that. The way that it's been interpreted and the way that it's been established is that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, right? Basically, bar none with rare stipulation, you're allowed to own firearms. But part of the conundrum there has been, it sounds like, right, if we read it in simple English, it's all one sentence. So the right to keep and bear arms is subordinate to a well-regulated militia. And well, what does well-regulated mean, right? And what's a militia? And this is why people get annoyed, I think, with lawyers and the law, because it's like, okay, well, where does it end? The reason that this is complicated, because Lance, I mean, I think in simple English, I agree with you. But when you look at when the Supreme Court has ruled on this and established your right to avoid self-incrimination, one of these significant cases was in 1966, and the Supreme Court held that, quote, when determining if state officers properly obtained a confession or evidence against a witness, one must focus on whether the statements were made freely and voluntarily without any direct or implied, promised or improper influence. And this is part of the defense being used in this current case, is that you are taking my phone, you are forcibly obtaining the information. I am not voluntarily handing it to you. And I understand your point, Lance, about we do subpoena things like phone records, right? Or we get a search warrant and then we get to go into your house and look through your things. The greater question here is it simply a phone still? Or is it more than that? And if it's more than that, where are those fine lines of what's on your phone that belongs to you and what's on your phone that we have a right to without you willingly giving it? In other words, law enforcement does not have the ability or the right to probe your brain, right, and try to extract specific thoughts from it. And so that's that whole question of, well, where is that line?
To your point, though, you just read from a 1966 case. We didn't have cell phones then. So is it time to take another look at that ruling and say, okay, this applies? And I'm thinking too, you say, well, they don't have the right to. We brought down a presidency because federal officials subpoenaed tapes from a president. And because of the way the president tried to cover it up, he ended up resigning and leaving office and having people leaders within his own political party come out against him. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Richard Nixon. So we've got more to talk about here because I think there's some historical data here that needs to be thrown into this as well.
There's a lot of different components to it. And I think, again, the interesting thing is maybe not so much the specific issue, but the greater issue of, as we always talk about, where does it end, right? Where does it begin and where does it end? To what extent does law enforcement have the right to come after you when attempting to prove you guilty? Because again, referring to our Constitution and our general rule of law in this land, supposedly, and this is the tough bar, right? Supposedly you are innocent until proven guilty. So how far can the law go in working to prove your guilt, or attempting rather to prove your guilt? Those are the questions we still have to answer. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Do Americans have a constitutional right to keep their passwords and passcodes private? And see, here's where you want to get into the weeds a little bit. You could say law enforcement has the right to take your phone and look through it if they can figure out how to look through it. They don't have the right to compel you to give up your personal passcode. And so then that gets into that. Can they solicit a company's help to open up your device, the company that created it? And of course, in the Apple case, Apple basically told law enforcement, we can't. We don't have, right? We don't have a way to do what you're asking. And then law enforcement said, well, you should develop one. And they said, well, we're not going to do that.
But don't people hack into our private accounts all the time? How in the world can Apple claim that? How can that be true? And I'm not a tech person, but we're all buying LifeLock or these other items. We all buy these individual programs to stop people from trying to hack our private information. So how in the world can there not be a way to get into this? And I'm not even going to, right now, I'm not even going to address whether or not I think law officials or the courts should have the right to make you do that. But how in the world is that even possible? I mean, as a non-tech savvy person, how in the world what do you mean they can't hack in there? We don't know how to do that. That just seems absurd. For the limited knowledge I have, that just seems absurd.
Well, part of understanding, it's not to say that there haven't been instances where illegal actors have developed a means to do this.
But if they did it on their iPhone, they're not going to be proved guilty because they can't be compelled to access how they did it. So therefore, they're going to get away with it. Yes, there have been people that have done this.
Yeah.
So explain my conundrum to me. How in the world can people break into stuff and then we allow the company who developed it to say, yeah, we don't know how to do this?
Your phone is basically encrypted, okay? Indistinguishable, right? Total gibberish until it's unlocked. The minute that you enter the appropriate passcode, your phone decrypts and opens up. If somebody was to steal the data from your phone and not have the PIN, it would make no sense to anybody ever. But in simplistic terms, encryption is unique to the various devices. So there's not like a universal, Apple doesn't have this nice little key, right, that they can just stick in a phone and say, well, that unlocks it. Lance's encryption is not the same as my encryption, is not the same as our listeners' encryption. Everybody's got a different one. The problem there is that there are so many different combinations that theoretically you could just try the combinations, right? Until you find the correct one that opens it. Like if you think of an old safe, right? I mean, you just eventually, yes, there are umpteenth combinations, but given enough time, you could open the safe, because eventually you would try every combination and one of those combinations would have to be it. That same principle is generally true with a phone. The way security works now, though, on phones, the way they've safeguarded against that is you only get so many attempts before the device permanently locks and in some cases erases all of its data. So law enforcement can't just sit there and try every combination until it opens. After just a few failed attempts, it will begin locking for longer periods of time until it eventually indefinitely locks itself. And the only way to unlock it then is with the person's original account information from a third-party device that they sign in and send an unlock signal from.
But how is the iPhone different than a personal computer?
And that's a good question. I think that's part of what's being discussed. It's easy to boil phones down to it being a phone or it being a computer, right? And so why do we treat it differently? I think this case, though, for what it's worth, people are going to look to apply it on a broader scale, right? If you can be compelled to provide your phone's passcode, then you can also be compelled to provide a password to log into your computer or to log into an online account or anything, right? I mean, anything that contains a personal identification number or code.
But can't the legal folks go in and subpoena my bank records now? And even if I do them all online, there's a way to go around and still get that information, whether I give it to them or not. They still have a way to get it, correct?
Sure. But that part of that, I think, is also, that's your terms of service with your bank, right? I mean, when you open your account, you have agreed to certain terms, including that, that basically your bank jointly owns that information with you, right? It's actually not strictly your information.
Oh, no, but I have to set my own password.
But they don't give your password away. They can access your account on the back end without your password. It's one of those notions that I think people believe, that like when I call up the bank, right, for support, that the person on the support end can actually see my password. They cannot. They have no access to it. They don't know what it is. They can't do anything with your password. Even higher ups at banks actually cannot see your individual password. It's all housed inside of a virtual lockbox, so to speak, that is impenetrable. The bank, however, can use their credentials to log into your account, right? So
how is that any different than the producers of iPhone or Androids or any other phone that's, quote, locked this way, having the right to do that? And then it's not even an issue, right? I mean, if we because they can't see it, blah, 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 but they're responsible because, where does this go? I mean, you keep talking in hypotheticals, which is fine because that's what we're doing here. But what you're telling me and my limited ability to think like a criminal is, well, if we say we can't touch iPhones, then I'm going to run everything that I do illegally through an iPhone. And then we've just said, okay, here you go, folks. You can commit any criminal activity, whether it's stealing somebody's money or their identity or whatever. You can do it. You can run numbers. You can run a gambling ring. You can keep your stuff on prostitution and drugs, all your laundering of money. You can keep all of that on your iPhone, and we're going to allow you to do that. We've just given the criminals something that they can use to continue their devious ways.
It may seem like semantics to people. I think the understanding is that right now, right, the government could get a search warrant, come to Lance's house and take his phone from him, right? They can do that. No question. They can do that. They go to open Lance's phone. Oh, there's a passcode here. Well, if we can figure out a way around that passcode, then we can have access to it. But can we force Lance, who the only place that thing resides in it is in his brain, do we have the legal right to compel Lance to provide us that code? And if he doesn't, do we have the right to then hold him in contempt? Right? That's really, at the end of the day, that's the question. Do we have a right to knowledge that's inside of your brain? You know?
But can a judge fine me for contempt of court if I've been subpoenaed to testify and the information's in my brain and I share and I don't use it? They have the right to then say, well, you're in contempt of court and you're going to sit in jail indefinitely and we're going to fine you so much a day until you come forward. And I mean, they have that right now in my brain.
Well, but see, and then that's
I'm not trying to argue semantics. I mean, I know I am, but it's like, I'm trying to see this. Okay. Where I don't understand where I can hide behind the phone when there are so many other legal issues that have already been addressed this way.
Because then the argument becomes that by providing this information, in this case, the passcode that's inside of your brain, you would be providing information that would be self-incriminating.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. I get that, but they could still get me for contempt of court. They could still get me in contempt. I can say, you know what? I'm going to stand up for my legal rights. And they could say, well, you're in contempt, and I could rot in jail on contempt charges because I didn't give them the information. I mean, that happens to news reporters all the time.
We may have to ask a lawyer for the specifics on this one, but I believe if your answer is, I decline to answer the question based on my constitutional rights under the Fifth Amendment, as long as you can provide valid justification the court will accept, and of course that's always depends on the court that you ask. That's why this has become a case, folks, is because, as you can tell, I mean, just Lance and I going back and forth, right? And kind of talking through this. It depends on how you look at the situation. So it's not just the conundrum in that sense, but then it's also what angle are we looking at it? Is it, well, the passcode's in my brain, so does a court have the right to that? Or is it more, well, my phone is just an external possession and just like a journal, diary, blog post, Facebook post, Twitter, tweet, right? Whatever. They can look at those things generally. Shouldn't they be able to look inside your phone, to Lance's point? And I guess that's the bigger question here is, how far do we want to let them go? When phones have become, and this is not, I don't think, an exaggeration, for many people, an additional limb, truly part of who somebody is, indicative to their daily operation in life.
That's a whole nother show, and that's sad, but I don't disagree with you.
Right. But the question becomes, we don't generally feel like law enforcement has the right to hack off your hand and, use your hand to testify against you in court. That may seem extreme. And am I saying that your phone is as valuable as your hand? Well, remember, everybody, I don't know, it was a few episodes ago now, but I think I shared that some 80% of people would rather lose their sense of smell than give up just social media. We didn't ask them about their phone. We said social media. So what happens if we say your phone, which gives you access to social media and all the ways that you communicate? What is somebody willing to give up in the name of that? That, to me, that's the ultimate question, and that's what we have to keep talking about. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Willer.
We obviously want to stop people from doing things that are illegal, and once they've done something illegal, we want to follow the criminal justice process. Bring them to justice, right? Show them how it is and what needs to be done and what their punishment is. At the same time, our resident friendly redneck liberal is also about keeping the man out of our business. And it seems like, don't we have to be careful, Lance, where we draw that line, because I agree, right? I mean, if somebody does something terrible, they use an iPhone and they use it to coordinate a terrorist attack and kill people. Should we have the right to look into that to help prove them guilty?
I'm a huge proponent of the Fifth Amendment. So if you've listened to the first two segments and you're like, oh, this guy's saying the police should be able to do whatever they want to, let the guy. That's not me at all. But herein lies the rub for me. But, I'm all about, hey, you want to take law enforcement out of it and everything, and I'm responsible for protecting myself, I'll do that. Okay. But we've chosen to live in a society where we don't. And so I guess I still believe I have that trust. And this is, I'm big on the word trust right now. I'm reading, Pete Buttigieg's second book and just finishing it up. And it's all about trust. And if we don't have trust that more than the majority of the time that we're going to do the right things, then can we really live in an open and free and democratic society? And I just think if people are using anything to commit crimes against others, as has been ruled by the Supreme Court on multiple occasions, law officials, law personnel can prove that there is evidence outside of what they're looking for that shows that a person might be guilty, then they have the right to subpoena that information. And so that's where I'm coming down on. And I know I'm splitting hairs, but that's my feeling, is that there are so many other places that your phone shouldn't, and the information in your phone should not be off limits, that it should not be off limits. And I don't see it. And again, I know that even lawyers and state Supreme Courts are split on this decision, but I don't see where you're testifying against yourself to give officials access to your phone. You should not be allowed to do illegal things on your phone or with your phone or store illegal information under the premise that you're safe, because authorities don't have that. Now, come at me with all your arguments, folks. Justin will hear in just a second, but let me know how you feel. Email us at podcast@thestateofus.org. Cause I'm not saying I'm right. I'm like everybody else. This technology is new to me. I mean, I grew up with landlines, right? I mean, I grew up getting yelled at for stretching the phone cord down the basement steps so nobody could hear me talking to my girlfriend in high school. So that's, so these cell phones and, instant messaging, all that kind of stuff. I was married by the time all that technology came on. So I understand that my breadth of experience is a lot different. Mm-hmm. So you got to tell me, explain to me where my argument is incorrect. Or if you agree with me, and say, yeah, you make some good points. Let me know that too, because I like to hear from people when I'm right, who agree with me. But a lot of times I hear people who disagree, and that's fine, because that's what we do here on this show. So it's okay either way. But so Justin, where am I missing the point here?
I don't think, and here's part of the problem, right? When we look at this stuff, I don't think you're missing the point on the criminal side. If you asked most Americans, this person's guilty, should we have a right to look inside their phone? I think most people would say yes.
I'm not saying they're guilty. I'm saying if there's other evidence. Because I'm innocent till proven guilty. And I'll fight my dying day to that premise. And I know we've incarcerated people unjustly. And that's, like I said, that's a whole nother show. And I understand that. But for the most part, we do a pretty good job with our system. So what I'm saying is, if they think that there's enough evidence to show that I might be guilty of something, they have the right to subpoena other records. I think they should have the right to subpoena my phone. That's where I am. And
I think we have to weigh, because we've looked at it from the side of that side. But what about, we always have to weigh is the benefit outweigh the cost? And what's the cost in this situation? Well, there's a lot of different ones, but let's just take a simple one. Court case comes forward and somebody's accused of something that they haven't done. Evidence is very compelling. I mean, we've all seen these cases. A person that was in the wrong place at the wrong time is brought to court. Their phones opened up. Their most personal, intimate messages with their spouse exposed, friends, family, etc. It's all a matter of public record now. And we get to the end of the trial. Jury says you're not guilty. Oh, we're really sorry. We're really sorry. you're going to get fired now because your boss found out you said some not so nice things, about them, not publicly. You thought it was private because you said it in a personal conversation, one-on-one in your personal device. But we're really sorry because, you were innocent and we found you innocent, but now it's out there and there's nothing we can do about that. Nothing. So you lose your job, your life is destroyed, you lose your friends because what? Because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time? Is that worth it?
When personal computers first came out, and I was one of the first school teacher in our district, I was one of 3 that had a computer put in my room. The first thing I was told by the communications director is, don't type anything in there that you don't want people to see. So again, it comes down to responsibility. So to this day, I will not type something that I'm not comfortable saying in public. So that's all you have to do there. And that solves the problem. That's my point, is too many people. I mean, that's one reason why I think why we're in this situation politically and not trusting people is because everybody gets a phone and then they tweet, they email, they do all this, they post on Facebook because they think they're having a private conversation. So you've given every individual the right to now share their deepest, darkest feelings and words out there in public, and they feel empowered. And maybe there's a point where this isn't a good thing. Maybe people need to step back and learn some self-control. And maybe we've reached that point. And then the other thing, and I'll let you then talk about that as well as this one. I'll throw something else at you. We always talk about the beauty of our Constitution is that it's a living, breathing document that has the ability to change. So why can't we do something now? Because you and I both believe, I think, that in 30 years, this will be a moot issue because we'll be getting new technology anyway. So just as we shouldn't quote a 1966 ruling to apply to cell phones, whatever ruling we have now probably won't be applied to whatever new technology we have that's developed that we don't even have yet. That'll be here after I'm gone. And the beauty of our system is that we have a document that allows us to make those changes as technology changes and as ideas change within our society. So are we really spending too much time on this? Why can't we just do something? And if we find out it doesn't work, or my argument, it's going to be obsolete in 20 years anyway, we can go ahead and change it and have a debate on the new devices or the new ways that technology is being used. So there you go. Couple things for you to comment on. I pretty much spent my brain here on everything I've got to say.
I am, I'm with you there, Lance, and I think our listeners do too, on we need a ongoing process on which to look at and continue to consider new technology, because the reality, is this is not slowing down, right? These advancements in technology, social media, none of it is going to stop. So if we anticipate, and it's only going to get faster, we must act now to set up the systems with which we wish to analyze these things, rather than doing this kind of fly by night and hope that it all works out okay. Because to Lance's point, we've said lots of times, does a 1966 law really, is that really what we want to be using to, look at these things? At the same time, we would also turn around and to point out our own hypocrisy here, and we're happy to use the 1964 Civil Rights Law to extend protection for the LGBT community. So I am not at all, it is not lost on me that when it fits our agenda, we're happy to use old laws. When it doesn't, then we don't want to. But I think generally we have to quit doing that, because to Lance's point, we're supposed to have a system of government where we can look at things again and change them and update them for modern times. We should not have to just have the discussion about this old law and these old cases. We should also be able to have the discussion in new context. But I think to the other point that you mentioned, Lance, I think people should be less trusting of technology, but I don't think that means they are relieved of their right to use it and to believe that they should not be able to be destroyed if they are innocent in a court of law. So no, I don't have a perfect answer, because I don't want people who commit things illegally to be able to get away with it simply because we couldn't get inside of their damn phone, you know. At the same time, I am also aware that our criminal justice system is sometimes used intentionally in the wrong way to destroy people, knowing that a case will never find them guilty of anything, but merely to bring forth embarrassing personal details, whether digital or otherwise. You know what I mean? It happens outside of the digital realm. Somebody finds a paper, a diary, whatever, and now it's public record. And that person didn't do anything wrong. You know, it just, well, yeah, in the course of figuring out if they did something wrong, we had to lay out their whole life for the public to see. And then, oh, well, they didn't do anything wrong. So real sorry. You know, and so I think that's the greater issue of will allowing law enforcement bring more good than it does harm? And if it does, then I think we should all be okay saying, yeah, we need to do that. If it's going to bring more harm than it is good, then we should say no. You know, we got to figure something else out. Because that's generally the measure, I think, that at least from a philosophical standpoint, we try to use in this nation, to Lance's point about our criminal justice system. No, it's not perfect. We incarcerate as much as 10% of the population wrongfully, right? So, yeah, 9 out of 10 times we get it right, but we also put millions of people in jail that don't deserve to be in jail. So, you know, no, it's not perfect, but the benefits outweigh the drawbacks, so to speak, is the general thinking. And I think that's the measure that we have to consider here, and same reason that we need criminal justice reform. So hopefully people understand why I'm not envious of the Supreme Court for this, because I think there's a lot of implications either way. It's a difficult thing to just, you know, wipe your hands of and say it'll be simple. But we don't just take on simple things here, right, Lance? I mean, That's kind of the whole point.
Right. I'm thankful for two things. One, that I live in a nation that allows us to have this conversation. And secondly, I work for a company that encourages us to have these kind of conversations. And that's our mission statement here at True Chat, is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we've done that today, and we're not claiming we have the right answers or that we have any answers. We have thoughts on this, and we've shared it with you, and we'd love to hear from you. If you like the show, if you don't like the show, whatever it is, share your thoughts with us. Share it with your friends. We want to get the conversation started so that we can, as a group, we're all smarter as a group than we are as individuals. And as a group, we can figure out what it is we need to do on this topic. So tell your friends and family about us. Tell them if they're looking for us, they can find us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is a podcast released Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. Eastern Time. We're also a syndicated radio program heard across the country in select talk markets. So check your local station, see if they carry us. If they don't, call them up, tell them they should. For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.